Yeah, as you know, the 7th session of the Committee on Regional Integration, the main objective was actually to be able to come up with recommendations, first of all to debate the whole idea of fast-tracking the Continental Free Trade Area. And so for us to be able to do this, we needed first of all to listen to what is happening in the continent at the moment. So we reviewed during the session the progress that has been made on regional integration in Africa. We looked at all the work that is ongoing at the country level on issues of infrastructure and natural resources. We also considered the implications of the developments in international trade on the realization of the Continental FTA. And then, of course, we looked at the work program of the Economic Commission for Africa with regard to regional integration and what we need to do so that we can actually help accelerate regional integration in the continent. On each of these issues, the member states that were present were able to come up with very clear recommendations on what needs to be done. With regards to the Continental FTA, there is consensus that we actually need to do more. In other words, everybody felt that there is need to actually accelerate. We don't have to wait for the many years that the Abuja Treaty has in terms of realizing the Continental FTA. Everybody seems to feel that we are actually ready to move now to achieve our Continental FTA. And beyond that, the meeting also said we don't need just to focus on the issue of an FTA with respect to the goods. It's a high time that African countries started thinking very seriously also on fast-tracking the trading services in this process of the Continental FTA. Of course, the meeting was able to identify some of the things that need to be done in order to accelerate the integration, because the Continental FTA needs to have results that are shared among the different countries. And the only way that can be done is by ensuring that the Continental FTA that we have win-win situation. And we can only be able to achieve that if we also address the issue of the supply side, diversification of the economies, especially for those weak economies, because that's the only way they can be able to realize benefits from the Continental FTA. So the meeting was able to identify issues that needs to be done at the country level that could actually help promote regional integration, accelerate the free trade area, but at the same time ensure that the integration through the Continental FTA is in such a way that everybody is benefiting from it and not just a few countries. First of all, the meeting actually also looked very seriously on the issue of what lessons can be learned on the experience of the tripartite FTA that COMESA, SADC and the EAC are currently in the process of establishing. And it was very clear that there is a best practice that other regional economic communities can actually learn from what the Eastern and Southern African region is doing. Because once you achieve the tripartite FTA, and then you start thinking of the Continental FTA, it's obvious that you will not be moving backwards, because the tripartite FTA becomes your starting point almost of moving towards the Continental FTA. Because as you might know, the tripartite FTA is actually going to cover a whole 26 countries. So the key on where you are starting is already a very broad base. Yeah, so we think there are lessons to be learned from the tripartite FTA, and beyond that there are also lessons that can actually be learned with the deep integration that we have in the East African community, because they have also been able to move all the way to the common market, which means as we think of the the Continental FTA, the fact that the movement of goods, the movement of persons is already taking place within the East African community. Again, we already have an acquis that we can actually start from when we are thinking of the Continental FTA. First of all, I think what we need to realize is that the African Trade Policy Center was actually established back in 2003. And the first phase of the ATPC was purposely designed in such a way that it would help the African countries be engaged and be very active in the Doha round of the trade negotiations. Now, this was based on an experience of what had come out of the Uruguay round, whereby the African countries were not as engaged in the negotiations process, to the point that when the agreement was reached, they were not able to realize the kind of gains or benefits they thought they would achieve from the implementation of the Uruguay round. So the response by the Economic Commission for Africa towards making sure that this does not happen in future was actually to work towards creating this center, which was able to work very closely with the African countries to help them harmonize their positions during the initial phases and the continuing phases of the trade negotiations, especially during the Doha round. At the same time, as you know, beyond the Doha round, the African countries have also been involved in the negotiations with the European Union under the Economic Partnership Agreement. And here you have a situation whereby you have a very experienced negotiator in terms of the European Commission. And then you have a lot of small African countries that do not have the same kind of capacity the European Commission has in terms of the negotiations. And in order to be able to elevate the capabilities of the African countries to be able to negotiate with the European Commission, that is how the ATPC was also seen could actually play a part in strengthening this capacity. Now, looking forward, the Doha round is not yet concluded. There are still a lot of contentious issues in the economic partnership agreements. There is also the global initiatives like the Aid for Trade, which are all aimed at ensuring that if you have market access, you can also be able to have the capacity to meet the demand of that market access. All these issues, the African Trade Policy Center is supposed, or at least has come to agreements with African countries that can actually help them be able to take benefits, or at least to realize the benefits from these global initiatives. And also, at the moment, the ATPC, as you know, also has 3 regional economic communities that it's focusing on. That is the EAC, SADC, and ECOWAS. And specifically for these 3 regional economic communities, what the ATPC is doing is also to help them build their institutional capacity within the secretariats themselves, so that they don't always have to come to ECA requesting for technical assistance, but they can actually be able to provide technical assistance to their members. So, broadly speaking, the ATPC is not only an instrument for institutional capacity building at the regional economic communities level, but it's also an instrument that has been put together to be able to help African countries also ensure that they actually get benefits from the global initiatives, be it the Aid for Trade or the outcomes of the Doha round under the WTO. In terms of what we are doing with as ECA, yes. In terms of what the African countries are doing themselves, even calling us as partners, I am optimistic. I think I can feel the energy, because listening to the debate that we had in the 7th session, it is not us from the ECA who are suggesting to them that you need to do more in the area of services liberalization. It is actually the member states who are telling us that we are already at the phase of actually coming up with the protocols that will enable us to liberalize trade in services, because we think you cannot talk of regional integration without having agreements that can allow you to mutually recognize each other's qualifications, especially in the context of services trade. So I am optimistic. If you look at the amount of resources that these countries are investing in infrastructure, investing in the productive capacity building, it tells you that they have actually got their priorities right. So in that sense, what is happening at the continental level, I'm very optimistic. Now, looking at the global picture, the picture is different, given that as we speak now, we are not sure where we are headed with the Doha Round. If you ask some people, they'll tell you that Doha Round is dead. If you ask others, they'll tell you that there is actually a room for us to have what you'd call harvesting the gains that had been achieved in the process of the negotiations. So at the global level, the picture is mixed. And if I was to think of what this means to what the African countries had hoped to get out of the Doha Round, then of course, in that aspect, I'm actually not optimistic. But for what the African countries are doing themselves, I'm very optimistic.